The moment the anesthesia hit my heart, everything went black. Then suddenly, I was standing in a marble hall of impossible beauty. 6 minutes. That's how long I was clinically dead on that operating table. But in those 6 minutes, I journeyed through heaven, witnessed souls arriving after death, saw my deceased pets running toward me across celestial meadows, and received a message from a being of pure light. When I finally gasped back to life, the doctors were stunned, not just because I returned, but because I remembered everything. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. I was at my parents' house that warm June afternoon in 2018. Life had been good to me, a successful architect with a loving wife Sarah, 5 months pregnant with our first child. Death was the furthest thing from my mind as I agreed to test my father's recently repaired Vespa scooter. "It runs like new," he said proudly, handing me the keys. I thought it would just be a quick ride around the neighborhood before heading to Sarah's ultrasound appointment. The familiar curves of Maple Avenue, where I'd ridden my bicycle throughout childhood, welcomed me. As I rounded a bend near the small park, a gray squirrel appeared in the middle of the road. Its beady black eyes locked with mine in what felt like a moment of mutual recognition. Perhaps because I had been an animal lover all my life, having owned my golden retriever Max for 12 years before he succumbed to cancer, I instinctively swerved hard to the right to avoid hitting the small creature. The scooter skidded on the still damp pavement from the overnight rain. In a heartbeat, I lost control and slammed directly into a large oak tree. The impact was so severe that I heard the unmistakable sound of bones shattering in my right hand. Pain shot through my body like an electric current. I remember clearly the scream of a woman walking nearby and then the wail of an ambulance siren. At the hospital, Dr. Emily Rodriguez explained that I had completely severed the tendons in my right hand and needed emergency surgery to reattach them. "Without this procedure, you might lose function in your hand," she warned. As an architect, my hands were my most valuable tools, so I agreed immediately to the surgery. Sarah arrived at the hospital, her eyes red from crying. "I'll be right outside," she said, gently squeezing my left hand before the nurse wheeled me into the operating room. I had never undergone surgery before. The cold room with its harsh lighting and the steady beeping of machinery made me anxious. The anesthesiologist, Dr. Marcus Kim, smiled reassuringly as he explained the procedure. "I'll be administering propofol into your IV," he said. "Try counting backward from 10. As the needle entered my vein, I felt the cold liquid entering my body. 10, 9, 8. I began counting. Suddenly, a burning sensation spread from my arm to my shoulder, down through my neck and into my chest. I clearly remember the moment the anesthesia reached my heart, like a gentle electric shock, and then my heart stopped beating. I later learned I had experienced a rare allergic reaction to the anesthesia, occurring in only about 1 in 50,000 cases. The anaphylactoid reaction caused my heart to stop immediately. According to the medical report, I was clinically dead for 6 minutes before the emergency team could restart my heart. But during those 6 minutes, I experienced what many researchers refer to as a near-death experience, NDE. And it was unlike anything I had ever known or imagined possible. The most striking thing about this experience was its clarity. Unlike dreams, which often have a hazy, disconnected quality, everything I experienced felt more real than reality itself. Colors were more vibrant, sounds more distinct, and emotions more profound than anything I had ever felt in my physical life. The moment I closed my eyes in the operating room, I opened them elsewhere. There was no sense of transition or drift, just an instantaneous shift, as clear as changing channels on a television. I found myself standing in a perfect marble building, so vast I couldn't see its end. Light filled every corner, not harsh or uncomfortable, but warm and welcoming, a soft ivory gold that seemed to radiate peace and love. The air itself felt different, carrying a sense of profound tranquility that immediately erased any confusion I might have felt. Along the left side of the corridor stretched ornate arched doorways, exquisitely carved from the same luminous marble. Each doorway stood about 10 meters apart, forming an endless row that extended farther than my eyes could see. To the right of these doorways, approximately 4 meters away, were round tables made of the same stone, each surrounded by 4 seats. I wasn't alone. A voice spoke near my left ear, resonating with a clarity like crystal bells. "This is the orientation center," the voice informed me. I couldn't see the speaker, but I sensed their presence, a warm, friendly energy beside me. "Who's speaking to me?" I asked, feeling curiosity rather than fear. "I am Daniel, one of your guides," the voice replied. "I've been with you through many lifetimes, though you don't remember that." Strangely, I felt no confusion or doubt. I wasn't thinking about the surgery, my pregnant wife, or the fact that I was in a completely unfamiliar place. Instead, I experienced a deep curiosity and an unusual sense of peace. "What are those doorways?" I asked, pointing toward the arched entrances. "Come see for yourself," Daniel suggested. I approached the first doorway and looked inside. It wasn't a room or another corridor, but a vast space filled with stars, planets, and galaxies. Swirling lights formed streams of multicolored energy, creating a living cosmic painting of breathtaking beauty. I realized these weren't the stars I had seen from Earth, but something entirely different, a universe with its own physics and rules. "This is the pathway that souls travel when they leave their physical bodies," Daniel explained. "Each doorway represents a different path from different worlds." As Daniel spoke, I noticed a light appearing in the second doorway several meters away. The light gradually condensed into the form of a tall man wearing a business suit, his right hand clutching his left chest. His face showed confusion and a hint of fear as he glanced around like a tourist in a foreign land. "This man just experienced a heart attack," Daniel said. "He died in his office in Tokyo, Japan, just seconds before you arrived here." A woman rose from the nearest table and approached the disoriented man. As she drew closer, I noticed she wasn't an ordinary woman. A subtle light emanated from her, and her face carried a depth of compassion I had never witnessed in anyone. "Hello, Takeshi," she said in a gentle voice. "I am Amara. Please sit with me." The woman led Takeshi to the table, taking his trembling hands in hers. Though I stood at a distance, I could hear their conversation clearly due to a strange acoustic effect. Where am I?" Takeshi asked, his voice bewildered. "I was preparing for a presentation, then the pain, my colleagues." "You've completed that lifetime, Takeshi," Amara said softly. "You've returned home." "Home?" he questioned. "You mean I've—" "Yes, your physical body has died. But as you can see, you still very much exist. You've returned to your true source." Something remarkable began to happen. As Takeshi continued his conversation with Amara, his appearance changed. His silver hair gradually turned black. The wrinkles on his face slowly disappeared. His hunched shoulders straightened. Within minutes, he had transformed into a younger man, perhaps in his early 30s. "He's remembering his true self," Daniel explained to me. "The soul body doesn't age. It only reflects how we see ourselves. Takeshi is returning to his essential nature." "What about my wife?" Takeshi asked Amara, his voice now stronger. "My son, he's only 15. They will grieve, but they will heal," Amara responded. "And when the time is right, you will reunite. Time here is different than what you've known." I watched as Takeshi processed this information. His eyes filled with tears, but they seemed to be tears of understanding rather than sadness. "Will I be able to help them somehow?" he asked. "Yes," Amara nodded. "Love transcends the boundary between worlds. They will feel your presence in moments of quiet, in dreams, and in the memories you've shared. Your love for them continues." After their conversation, Amara led Takeshi toward the right side of the table. They walked down 3 marble steps into what I can only describe as the most beautiful garden imaginable. The colors were more vivid than any I had seen on Earth. Purples deeper than amethyst, blues clearer than the purest ocean, and greens that seemed to pulse with life. As they entered the garden, a group of people approached. They embraced Takeshi, kissing his cheeks and welcoming him with obvious joy. "Welcome home," they called out. "You did wonderfully. We've missed you." "Who are they?" I asked Daniel. "His soul family, beings who have shared many experiences with him across numerous lifetimes. Parents, children, friends, teachers, students. The roles change, but the connections remain." I watched several more souls arrive through different doorways. Some appeared confused, others seemed relieved, and a few arrived with quiet dignity, as if they had been expecting this transition. Each was greeted by a counselor, who guided them through their orientation. The counselors help souls remember who they truly are, Daniel explained. Some, especially those who lived long lives deeply immersed in their earthly identities, need more assistance in recalling their greater existence. Others, particularly children, transition more easily because they haven't been away from home as long. I observed a young girl, perhaps 7 or 8, emerge from a doorway. Unlike the adults, she showed no confusion. She smiled broadly and ran directly to the garden without needing any orientation, where she was enveloped in the embraces of those waiting for her. She remembers, Daniel said simply. Children often maintain their connection to this realm more easily than adults do. After observing several more arrivals, Daniel suggested we move to another location. There's more I'd like to show you, he said. This isn't your time to stay, but there's a purpose to your visit. We moved, not by walking, but through a form of intention. I merely needed to focus on following Daniel, and we were instantly outside a magnificent Greco-Roman building with pristine white columns arranged in a circle supporting a majestic dome. This is where we plan our lifetimes, Daniel explained as we entered. All lives go through a planning process before souls incarnate. Life isn't random or accidental. There's purpose and intention behind each experience. The interior was open and spacious with a central atrium beneath the dome. Light poured in from above, illuminating several circular tables where groups of beings sat in deep discussion. The atmosphere was one of focused collaboration, like architects designing complex structures with careful deliberation. At one table, Daniel showed me 2 scrolls, one with a blue ribbon and one with a red ribbon. I didn't immediately understand their significance. These are your life scrolls, he said. Everyone writes down the major points of their lifetime before incarnating. Where they'll live, who their parents will be, whether they'll pursue education, what career path they'll follow, their financial circumstances. All these details are prepared in advance. I reached for the blue ribbon scroll, curious about its contents. As I began to unroll it on the table, something strange happened. The scroll immediately rolled itself back up. You're not permitted to read that until you complete your current lifetime, Daniel explained. I'm showing you this to help you understand that your life has purpose and design. You chose certain experiences and challenges for your growth. But if everything is planned, why don't we remember making these plans? I asked. The forgetting is intentional, Daniel replied. If you knew exactly what you were supposed to do and learn, you wouldn't truly test yourself. The challenges wouldn't be authentic if you remembered choosing them. The veil of forgetting allows for genuine growth. Looking around the planning hall, I saw souls in various stages of preparation. Some were in animated discussion, others in quiet contemplation. Guides moved among them, offering counsel and assistance. At one table, I observed what appeared to be a family group, souls planning to incarnate together. They were discussing their relationships and the lessons they would help each other learn. Those souls are planning to be a family, Daniel confirmed. The one who will be the father has been the daughter in a previous lifetime. They're designing experiences that will help each other grow through challenges and love. Daniel explained that souls often incarnate in groups, taking different roles in different lifetimes to learn from varied perspectives. The mother becomes the son, the enemy becomes the friend, the teacher becomes the student, all to develop deeper understanding and compassion. What about difficult lives? I asked, thinking of the suffering I'd witnessed on Earth. Do souls choose painful experiences? Yes, Daniel nodded, his energy conveying compassion. Some of the most challenging lives offer the greatest opportunities for growth. Souls sometimes choose hardship to develop specific qualities, courage, forgiveness, compassion. But no soul experiences more than they can handle, and no one journeys alone. As we moved through the planning hall, I noticed areas dedicated to specific aspects of life design, relationship planning, career exploration, and challenge selection. Some souls were working with what looked like 3-dimensional models of potential life paths, examining different decision points and their likely outcomes. Free will and destiny work together, Daniel explained, sensing my question. The major events, what you might call destiny points, are often planned, but how you respond to them is always your choice. Those choices create new pathways and possibilities. Before leaving the planning hall, Daniel led me to a special alcove where a group of advanced souls worked with newly created souls who had never incarnated before. These are new souls preparing for their first lifetime, he said. They're eager but require extra guidance. Their first experiences are usually brief and relatively simple, perhaps as a child who passes early or in a lifetime with limited circumstances. They're like children taking their first steps. I watched the new souls glowing with innocence and excitement as they prepared for their first journey into physical existence. Their enthusiasm was touching and reminded me of children preparing for their first day of school, nervous but eager to explore. Every soul you meet on Earth is at a different stage in their journey, Daniel said. Some are on their first lifetimes, while others have lived hundreds. That's why judgment is misplaced. You never know what part of the path another soul is walking. After leaving the planning building, Daniel led me to a vast, rolling meadow. The landscape was reminiscent of Earth's most beautiful countryside, but enhanced beyond anything I had seen before. The grass rippled in a gentle breeze, each blade seeming to shimmer with its own inner light. Wildflowers in colors I had never imagined possible dotted the hillsides. Every animal that has ever been loved awaits their person here, Daniel said, gesturing toward the hills. As if on cue, I saw movement on the nearest hillside. Animals of all kinds, dogs, cats, horses, birds, and many others, came bounding down the slope. What struck me most was their vitality. Each moved with perfect health and obvious joy. "Look," Daniel said softly, "some of them are coming for you." My heart leaped as I recognized 4 familiar forms racing ahead of the others. Max, my golden retriever who had died from cancer 3 years earlier, led the way. His coat gleamed in the light, his body showing no signs of the disease that had taken him. Behind him came Bella, a calico cat who had been hit by a car when I was 15, a loss that had devastated me. Following them were Rusty, my childhood beagle, and Pepper, the black kitten who had lived only 6 weeks before succumbing to a congenital heart defect. Max reached me first, jumping up and placing his paws on my chest, exactly as he had done every day when I returned home from work. The weight of his paws, the softness of his fur, the warm breath as he panted happily, every sensation was perfectly real. Tears filled my eyes as I wrapped my arms around him. "He's been waiting for you," Daniel said. "They all have." Bella approached more cautiously, exactly as she had in life, before rubbing against my leg and letting out her distinctive chirping meow, a sound I hadn't heard in 20 years but recognized instantly. Rusty barked excitedly, running circles around me, while tiny Pepper climbed onto my shoe, looking up with those bright blue kitten eyes I had never forgotten. "They're all healthy," I said in amazement, noticing that Max's gray muzzle was now golden again, and Pepper had grown slightly stronger than he had been in his brief life. "They're in their perfect state here," Daniel explained. "Just as souls remember their true nature, animals return to their most vibrant form. They're free from pain, aging, and illness." As I knelt to better greet my old friends, I noticed other reunions taking place across the meadow. A woman was embracing a large German shepherd, both of them radiating joy. A young boy, who seemed to have recently arrived based on the counselor still standing nearby, was being nearly bowled over by an enthusiastic Labrador puppy. "The animals play together until their loved ones arrive," Daniel said. "They form friendships with other animals, but always maintain a special connection with those who loved them in physical life." I watched as Max played with a tennis ball that seemed to have materialized from nowhere, his favorite activity in life. He would bring it back to me, drop it at my feet with the same expectant look, and wait for me to throw it again. The meadow echoed with barks, purrs, and human laughter. "What happens when I have to leave?" I asked, suddenly concerned about abandoning them again. "Time works differently here," Daniel reassured me. "What may seem like days or years to you passes differently for them. When your physical life ends and you return permanently, they'll be waiting just as you see them now." I noticed something remarkable about the meadow itself. The grass and flowers seemed almost conscious, responding to the emotions of the animals and people. When a particularly joyful reunion occurred, the flowers nearby would bloom more vibrantly, and the grass would become a richer green. The environment here responds to consciousness, Daniel explained, noticing my observation. The meadow isn't just a place, it's a living expression of the love between these souls. As I reluctantly prepared to move on, each of my pets came to me for a final moment of connection. Max placed his paw in my hand, a trick I had taught him as a puppy. Bella purred loudly as she rubbed her head against my chin. Rusty licked my face once, and little Pepper curled up briefly in my palm. "They understand you'll return," Daniel said. "The bond between you remains unbroken." After the bittersweet farewell to my pets, Daniel guided me to a different area of the meadow. Unlike the rolling hills we had just left, this section was perfectly flat, covered with grass that shimmered like emeralds in the perpetual golden light. "There is someone who wishes to speak with you," Daniel said, his voice carrying a new tone of reverence. As I stood waiting, I sensed a change in the atmosphere, a deepening of the peace and a heightening of the clarity I had been experiencing. The air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Then I saw him, a figure approaching from about 20 yards away. As he drew closer, I realized I couldn't make out his features clearly because he was emanating such intense light. He appeared to be wearing a simple white robe with a red sash around his waist, but the light surrounding him made details difficult to discern. When he was about 6 feet from me, he stopped. The light emanating from him was so bright that I should have been blinded, yet somehow I could still see. I felt no fear, only a profound sense of being in the presence of immense wisdom and love. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't directly answer my question. Instead, he raised his hands slightly, palms facing toward me. The gesture wasn't demanding but inviting, as if opening a door between us. "You must tell them there is no death," he said. His voice resonated, not just in my ears but throughout my entire being, like a perfect chord struck on an instrument I didn't know existed. "Tell who?" I asked. "Those who grieve, those who fear, those who have forgotten their true nature," he replied. "The transition you call death is but a doorway, a return to your true home and state of being." I thought of Sarah, my pregnant wife, waiting anxiously at the hospital. I thought of all the people I had known who lived in fear of death or who were devastated by the loss of loved ones. "But how can I explain something so indescribable?" I asked. "This place, these experiences, they're beyond words." "Use the words you have," he said gently. "Some will understand, some will remember, some will be comforted. That is enough." The being of light then shared something I hadn't expected. A vision of interconnectedness that showed me how all souls, whether in physical bodies or not, remain connected by bonds of love and consciousness. I saw the grief of those left behind when someone dies, but I also saw how the departed soul remains aware of and connected to their loved ones. "The veil between worlds is thinner than most realize," he explained. "In quiet moments, in dreams, in sudden feelings of peace or presence, connection continues. When you return to your physical life, remember this truth." I felt the weight of this message. It wasn't just about sharing a comforting story. It was about helping people understand a fundamental truth about existence that could transform how they lived and how they faced their inevitable transition. "Will I remember all this?" I asked, suddenly worried that these profound revelations would fade when I returned to my body. "You will remember what you need to remember," he answered. "The essence will remain, even if some details fade. Your soul knows what it experienced, even if your mind struggles to contain it." The being of light placed his hand near but not touching my forehead. "When the time comes for your final return home, I will be waiting, as will all those you have loved." With those words, the light surrounding him intensified until it filled my entire field of vision. In that moment of pure radiance, one truth became absolutely clear. Consciousness continues. Love continues. We continue. The very instant the being of light finished speaking, I felt a violent jolt, like being pulled backward at incredible speed. The golden light disappeared, replaced by harsh fluorescent lighting and the sound of urgent voices. "He's back! He's back!" a male voice exclaimed. "We've got a rhythm." Pain flooded back into my awareness, my hand, my chest, my throat. The peaceful weightlessness I had experienced was replaced by the heavy sensation of being once again bound to a physical body. I tried to speak but discovered an intubation tube in my throat. Dr. Emily Rodriguez leaned over me, her face a mixture of relief and astonishment. "Michael, can you hear me? Blink twice if you can hear me." I blinked twice, still trying to process the abrupt transition. According to the clock on the wall, only 6 minutes had passed since my heart had stopped. 6 minutes during which I had experienced what felt like hours in another realm. The medical team worked rapidly around me, stabilizing my condition and checking my vital signs. I heard fragments of their conversation: complete cardiac arrest, anaphylactic response, 6 minutes without oxygen, possible brain damage. I wanted to tell them I was fine, better than fine, but the tube prevented speech. Instead, I focused on moving my fingers and toes, trying to demonstrate that my neurological function was intact. Later that evening, after I had been extubated and moved to the ICU, Sarah was finally allowed to see me. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw me conscious and alert, she broke down, pressing her forehead against mine as tears flowed freely. "They told me you died on the table," she whispered, "for 6 minutes. 6 minutes, Michael." I squeezed her hand weakly. "I need to tell you something," I managed to say, my voice raspy from the intubation tube. "Something important happened while I was gone." The skeptical look that crossed her face was understandable. Dr. Kim had warned her that patients often have strange dreams or hallucinations under anesthesia, especially during traumatic events. But I knew with absolute certainty that what I had experienced was neither a dream nor a hallucination. Over the next few days, as my strength returned, I began to share details of my experience with Sarah. I told her about the marble corridors, about Takeshi and his orientation, about the planning hall with its life scrolls, and about seeing our pets again, including Max, whom Sarah had known and loved. "He still carries the tennis ball the same way," I told her. "And Bella still makes that chirping sound when she's happy." Sarah listened with a mixture of wonder and doubt. "How can you be sure it wasn't just your brain creating comforting images while it was oxygen deprived?" she asked gently, not wanting to dismiss my experience but seeking rational explanation. "Because it wasn't like a dream," I explained. "It was clearer, more coherent, more real than anything I've ever experienced. And I learned things I couldn't possibly have known." To demonstrate, I shared details about Takeshi, the Japanese businessman who had died of a heart attack at almost the exact same time as my surgery. 3 days later, Sarah brought her laptop to the hospital and showed me a news article from a Tokyo newspaper. A senior executive at a technology firm had indeed died of a heart attack at his desk, at precisely the time I had been in surgery. His name was Takeshi Yamamoto. This was the first of several validations that would occur in the months and years that followed. I correctly identified the previously unknown cause of Pepper's death as a congenital heart defect. Something confirmed when Sarah found his veterinary records in storage. I accurately described my maternal grandmother's childhood home, which I had never seen or been told about. The recovery process was challenging, not just physically as my hand healed, but emotionally and spiritually as I integrated the profound experience into my everyday life. I found myself fundamentally changed. Material success, which had once been my primary motivation, now seemed far less important than the quality of my relationships and the impact I had on others. 6 months after the experience, when our daughter Emma was born healthy and perfect, I looked into her eyes and recognized an old soul, one I felt I had known before. The joy of her arrival was tempered by the knowledge that our time together, however long in human years, was just one chapter in an ongoing story. "She chose us," I whispered to Sarah as we admired our newborn, "and we chose her long before any of us were here." Sarah smiled, having gradually come to accept, if not fully believe, my changed perspective. "Just promise me you'll stay around to help raise her," she said. "No more close calls. It's been 7 years since my near-death experience, and not a day passes that I don't think about what I learned during those 6 minutes when I was clinically dead." The memory hasn't faded, as doctors predicted it might. If anything, certain aspects have become clearer with time and reflection. I was physically dead for 6 minutes, yet I experienced what felt like a 2-hour journey through the afterlife. This time discrepancy is something I still cannot fully explain. except to say that time as we understand it seems to be a construct limited to physical existence. My experience has become so much a part of who I am now that I share it with almost anyone willing to listen. Not to convince them of any particular belief, but because the being of light gave me a mission. You must tell them there is no death. I've spoken with scientists, religious leaders, skeptics, and believers. Some dismiss my story as the product of an oxygen-deprived brain. Others see it as confirmation of their spiritual beliefs. I don't argue with either position. I simply share what I experienced and let others draw their own conclusions. What matters most to me is the comfort this knowledge brings to those facing their own mortality or grieving the loss of loved ones. I've sat with terminally ill patients and shared the reality I witnessed, that death is not an end but a transition, that loved ones await us, and that even our beloved pets continue to exist in perfect form. The greatest gift of my experience has been freedom from the fear of death. This doesn't mean I'm eager to leave this life. I cherish every moment with Sarah and Emma and the new baby boy we're expecting next month. But I no longer fear the inevitable transition that awaits us all. If you'd like to hear more about what I saw during my journey, including the remarkable library I visited where I reviewed events from past lives, or the healing center where souls recover from particularly challenging lifetimes, there's a full, unedited interview available by clicking the link below. For those new to these concepts, I invite you to approach with an open mind. You don't have to believe everything I've shared. Simply consider the possibility that our existence is far more vast, more beautiful, and more meaningful than most of us have been taught to believe. The truth I learned in those 6 minutes is simple yet profound. Love continues. Consciousness continues. We continue. Have you ever sat at the bedside of a loved one, holding their hand as they slipped away, wondering where they've gone? Or perhaps you've looked into the eyes of your aging parents and felt that cold grip of fear, knowing their time and yours is limited. I understand. At 42, I faced death unexpectedly when my heart stopped on an operating table. For 6 minutes, I journeyed beyond the veil that separates this life from what comes next. What I discovered changed everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what matters most. I saw that your father who passed last winter isn't gone. Your mother who lost her battle with cancer still exists, vibrant and whole. The child you never got to watch grow up is waiting for you. Even your loyal companion who greeted you every day for 15 years, that dog who knew your soul better than most humans, is there, tail wagging, ready to welcome you home. In our middle years, we face a unique kind of loneliness. We become the caretakers of aging parents while still raising our own children. We attend more funerals than weddings. We begin to recognize our own mortality in new gray hairs and aching joints. We wonder if this is all there is. Work, responsibilities, brief moments of joy, then nothing. I'm here to tell you what I learned in those 6 minutes. There is no nothing. There is no end. The love you've shared with those who've passed remains a living connection. The father who taught you to ride a bike, the grandparent who slipped you candy when your parents weren't looking, the spouse who knew exactly what you needed without being told. They're not memories fading into darkness. They're waiting in a place where time works differently, where pain doesn't exist, where understanding replaces judgment. Most importantly, they see you still. They witness your struggles, your triumphs, your quiet moments of despair. That inexplicable feeling of peace that sometimes washes over you in your darkest hour, that sudden warm memory that brings a smile when you least expect it. These aren't random firings of neurons, they're moments of connection across the veil. This knowledge doesn't diminish the importance of our time here. Instead, it infuses each moment with greater meaning. How will you use the time you have? What relationships need healing before your transition? What legacy of love will you leave for those who remain when you journey home? Death isn't the enemy we've been taught to fear and fight. It's a doorway we'll all walk through, returning to our true home, reuniting with those who've gone before. Until then, live fully, love deeply, forgive quickly, and remember, when you stand at a graveside saying goodbye, it's not an ending. It's just intermission. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.